Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Sleep, Repeat. My name is Dylan.
And my name is Hayden.
And we want to make it really clear that you know who we are because quite often we'll get so say, is Dylan the bald one? No.
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 How do they describe you then?
They just...
No, he's the one. We'll let you guys fill that in. You got to think of an adjective.
What adjective would you put into that now phrase? The something Dylan.
He's the gorgeous one. He's the gorgeous one. There you
That's
go.
what I was waiting for.
Give you a nice one.
That's all I was waiting for. Someone did do a comment the other day about that joke that we always say, which was it was both of us were in the video. It was a clip from the podcast, and it was we were talking about something to do with school.
Yeah.
And this guy commented absolutely nothing to do with what the actual reel was about, and just commented saying these two guys have the right amount of hair for two people, just in the wrong place.
What? Thanks, mate. Some serious point like that, SEN or something.
Schools are at crisis funding point. You've got lots of hair.
He doesn't know. Brilliant. Wow.
I've got to mention a comment we got this week. I really tried to stay positive because we get so many amazing messages and comments and lovely stuff all the time. And I genuinely don't mind when people disagree with stuff because we put stuff that can be quite controversial out there, like opinions that people don't often say out loud, maybe. And some people might genuinely have a disagreement. And I don't mind that at all. But there are two times where I kind of feel like I need to reply to someone. One is where we've explained something in a reel, like really clearly. Like, for example, the one I can think of straight away is the teacher martyr one.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
We said a teacher martyr is someone who puts hours and hours and hours extra outside of work, okay, into the job.
Yeah.
And judges other people who don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. We very clearly said that it's about the whole idea of you judging other people, you wear it as a badge of honor, you think other people who don't do it.
The whole package.
Teachers. The whole package.
Yeah.
The amount of people who commented on it going, I completely disagree. I work extremely hard, thank you, and I'm not a martyr. And I feel the need to, I need to reply because I'm like, okay, so this person did this, and I replied saying, do you judge other people who do less than you and think they're a worse teacher because of it? Because if you don't, then I am not talking about you.
Yeah.
And then the reply was just, well, I think it's quite rude, actually. I'm like, oh my God. And she literally said, well, I thought this was a place for discussion. Clearly not. I can't just air my opinion. And I was like, look, no, I don't mind people saying things back that disagree.
Yeah.
But one, you have to like reference correctly what I said in the first place.
Yeah.
And number two, a discussion involves two people. When I reply to you, you can't go, well, I thought this was a discussion. Yes. I'm replying and having a discussion.
Do you know, at least watch the reel before you comment. Right? Genuinely, I love seeing you get triggered. I love it. I love it when I sometimes you run the Instagram. I'll look through the post and I'll see some comments and I'll see one reply and I'm like, here we go. I'm going to open this up and it's going to be Dylan being really sarky.
I try so hard because I ignore quite a lot of the other comments. And if people disagree, I'll have like a conversation with them. And I'll be like, I kind of understand what you mean.
That's fair.
I think this because of that, but I completely get what you mean. When someone just like completely misrepresents what you say in the literal video they're commenting on, I'm just like, what is wrong with you? I'm not talking about you. Loads of people work really hard as a teacher. I don't think you're a martyr because of that. I think you're a martyr because of the way you act about it. If that's you. If it's not you, I am not talking about you. Keep scrolling.
Yeah. But it's rude, Dylan. It's rude. Okay, you're making comments about other people.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But we are. And at least they're trying to back up their corner and argue for something. The other type are just people I think are insane. And with those, I tend to just like leave a laughy face or something because I'm just like, I can't even be bothered.
What was that one the other you did something the other day?
So this is the one that if you follow our Instagram at Teach Sleep Repeat Podcast, which everyone should do, by the way, just nearly at 20k followers, by the way.
Yeah, amazing.
Pretty cool.
Well done, Dylan.
But, anyway, someone commented, I did a meme. So firstly, it's a meme.
Yeah.
Anyone leaving a serious comment on a meme, honestly, get in the bin. It's a meme. It's a joke. Anyway, this meme was, the caption was something like, when a child says, oh, my teacher did Elf on the Shelf last year. I can't wait to see what the elf gets up to this year. And then the idea was underneath, it was me, as in the teacher.
Yeah.
And it was just someone going, I don't think I'll be doing that. Basically, because I don't do Elf on the Shelf. I personally think it's a waste of time and I don't like it.
Yeah.
If you do it, all goodness to you. I don't care. Brilliant. I don't honestly, whatever.
You don't think it's objectively bad?
Yeah, I don't think it's objectively bad. I don't think it's objectively good. I get when people say you shouldn't do it because of X. I get when people say I do it because of Y. Sometimes you're allowed to have a disagreement. There's not one right answer here, I don't think.
You just don't care.
Whatever. I just don't care. I don't do it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Someone commented going, if you seriously can't be bothered to do something like this for the kids, then I don't think teaching is for you. I was just like, and she was being dead serious, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, in my head, I came up with 7 different replies. There, one was serious, one was funny, one was witty, and I just landed on 4 laughy crying emoji faces. I was just like, I can't even do that because you know what? I knew other people underneath would reply, and they did all the replying for me. There are actually people out there who genuinely, right, will judge teachers based on things like that before even seeing them teach. The amount of people I've seen online say to me, well, you're clearly not a good teacher because of something I've said that is completely separate to my actual ability to teach.
Really far removed from if you think about it, if someone said like, write down on paper what's a teacher, they wouldn't even write that thing down. It's like, it wouldn't even be on the list, genuinely.
It's like, you have absolutely no idea how much time and effort I put into teaching these kids, how good I am at teaching. I could, honestly, to this person, you could be the best teacher in the world. I'd be like, you don't do Elf on the Shelf? Get out of that classroom, please. You're not a regular teacher, are you?
Let me guess. You haven't even got them all a Christmas present, each individually wrapped with a Christmas card that you've made at home. I bet you haven't even done that, have you?
Yeah. Guys, nuance, okay? If you do that, cool.
Yeah.
I don't do that.
It doesn't make you a bad teacher.
Exactly that. And do you know what? It can make you a good teacher in a way, in terms of if you're judging people on doing, like, going the extra mile in that respect for the kids. I'm not against someone saying, wow, that's really cool for the children. Aren't you great? Well, what I'm saying is it doesn't automatically mean the opposite if you don't.
Exactly. We've literally said on this podcast loads of times, building relationships with kids is really, really important, and probably, if not the most important thing to do as a teacher, right? So obviously doing something like that is helping you build a positive relationship. So we're never going to say that's a bad thing or it does nothing. It's just, like you said, the opposite is not then true by default.
Anyway. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, anyway, that was my week in social media.
Tell me about your week at school.
My week at school. Well, we did, I've got one story. And it just reminded me again about how kids are really quite simple, aren't they? As in, like, then some people think, oh, I couldn't possibly work with children. That's just so complicated. We did a States of Matter lesson. And the stuff we were doing, honestly, I looked at it and I thought, okay, is this it's quite hard for year 4 children, basically. The idea of particles, like, I love this, and you can get across to a 9-year-old what a particle is. You can do that. And the lesson was successful. But I just looked at the whole thing and I just thought, God, this is quite abstract. By definition, I physically can't show them particles, so you can represent it in different ways, get out the blocks and stuff, and talk about what particles are. And there was one part where, so I said to them, okay, guys, listen, we know particles are really small, you can't see them. They were like, is a grain of sand a particle? And I was like, that's such a good question. I love those types of questions. I was like, you're thinking of the exact right
thing here.
Where's
the size limit?
And I was like, listen, they act like grains of sand in certain situations because they all clump together and they take the form of different things, of liquid, solid, whatever. But no, if you can see it, it can't be a particle. They're so small. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. So I said, right, so what we're going to do now, you guys are going to be the particles in a material. And you're going to either be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. So I got them all stood up in the middle of the room, made a little bit of a clearing. I said, right, you're all particles right now. I'm going to say a state of matter, and you need to act that way. We've just gone through it on the board with pictures and stuff and how it would look. So I said, solid. And they all clump together, but they're all moving around and joking. I'm like, no. I said solid. It's rigid. It's still. You're touching. It's rigid. It's still. And then one of them just goes, "We got to be like penguins." And they all get together. They're dead still. They are having the time of their lives. This is what I mean when they're simple. This little tiny thing where we just did this for 4 minutes in the lesson, completely transformed now that they'll remember it. And they really enjoyed it and they loved it. And that's what I mean when you say you don't have to go over the top with lessons sometimes. Just have to be a bit of interaction.
How did it go when you said to do gas?
Well, this is what I'm going to go to now. So I said liquid.
Right.
And the point, again, I was saying to them, I let them just do what they were doing, but they were like running around basically. I was like, look, liquid, the particles still touching. They're still together, but they can move around each other. But they still have to maintain the fact they're touching because that's what the particles do in a liquid. They've got a bit more energy. You've got a bit more energy now, but not enough to break free. So then they're going around like, cool, no problem. Gas, whenever I say gases expand. And they leave each other. And when I say gas, you need to go back to your seat, basically. And that was what a gas was, just spreading back out.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice idea.
But I said only when I say gas. And I was like, ready? Solid. And then they start running. I'm like, oh no, God, get back. And they're being really still. And you go backwards, solid, liquid. And then you finally say gas and they go back to their seat. So then they're like laughing their heads off. They're loving it. They're ready to write stuff down then because they've just acted it out. And one of the kids, you could just tell he was really excited about it. He's, can we do it again? And I was like, okay, not really. But what I'm going to do, if I say solid, liquid, and gas now, and have my hand in the air, you've got to get out your seats and come and do it. Because we were doing a lesson on solid, liquid, and gas. I was going to say this word so often. And I was saying it. And then I just forgot that I'd said that. And it got to the end of the day. They were getting their stuff. And I said, your table, get your stuff. And this lad come up to me and goes, when are we going to do that again? And I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course. And I was like, listen, at some point tomorrow, I'm going to do it. So tomorrow, which was Wednesday, it was English, completely separate. And my English class, they're all from my class. So we'd all done that lesson yesterday. And I put my hand up in the air and I sometimes I do that to get their attention. And I went, solid. And like 4 of them ran out, including that boy. And the rest are like, what's going on? And they're like, oh my God. And then they all ran out in the middle of English, in the middle, pretending to be solid. Did solid liquid, gases, ran back. And this whole time, there was one girl just sat in the corner like, what is going on? She wasn't here yesterday. She wasn't here yesterday.
No clue.
The teacher had just said solid. The kids and she went, what's going on?
That's such a good experiment. Like, imagine if she just went, okay, and just got up and joined in, having no clue what was going on.
She had no idea.
Oh, that's really funny.
But the idea of that story basically is your kids want to enjoy learning.
Yeah, of course
stuff.
they do.
Just little tiny things, little tiny tweaks like that. Honestly, a bunch of them will remember stuff now they might not have done otherwise.
Yeah. Would you have been worried? Because it's a legitimate thing. I think I know what you'll think. But would you have been worried if the head teacher came in during that moment when they were most hyped, and then maybe were running when they were supposed to be liquid, but they hadn't quite worked out what liquid was yet? Like, so it looks like chaos. Yeah. They've got nothing written down in their books at that point. Would that have thrown you off?
Honest, not one bit. Like I said a million times, at the start of my career, maybe. Yeah. Right. But there's 2 situations here. Number one, as the teacher, you just need to be confident in the fact that you know they're learning something right now. Yeah. Okay. That's the first thing. The second thing, if you're in a school where that's actually a problem, leave the school. If you're in a school where the head teacher comes round and you're doing that and you say, maybe they ask for an explanation. That might be annoying, but you're like, okay, fair enough. Of course I'll explain it to you then. It's because of this. If then it's still a problem, leave school. Yeah. It's not the right...
So the head teacher says, okay, I can see what you're doing, but it did mean they got less written down in their books, and now I can't see as much evidence.
Leave the school.
Yeah.
Get out of the school. Toxic, right? Honestly, leave the school. Yeah, genuinely. Because my point with that is I don't want to work in that environment.
Yeah, it crushes your career.
Yeah. And it might... Do you know what? We use toxic a lot. Like... Yeah. It probably is toxic. Maybe it's not toxic in the way we think of, like treating people awfully and stuff. Maybe I wouldn't say, oh, there's a toxic school. They won't let me have my kids run around the classroom. But what I would just say is, okay, if that's actually what you think here, and you have that much of a problem with it that I couldn't possibly do this, even though as a professional I've said this is why I'm doing it, and you still can't see that, then I would leave the school.
Yeah, we're not compatible at that point,
exactly that.
And there is compatibility in teaching. There is. Yeah. Like there are going to be some schools that literally just fit you better. And they won't fit me.
Exactly. And do you know what? It might be reasonable. Do you know, honestly, it might be reasonable for someone to be like, oh, just maybe we don't do that then. Maybe there's I don't agree with it, but I don't have to agree with everything. I think people listen to this podcast and they think, wow, your school must be like 10 out of 10 in everything. You agree with absolutely everything that goes on. No, I'm an adult. And I'm doing a job. And there's some stuff I like that I do. There's some stuff I don't really like and agree with, but I still do it because it's my job. Yeah. And there's other stuff which to me is past the line where I'm just like, okay, I'm going to bring something up or ask about it. And it's usually
a negotiation of some sort, maybe.
Exactly.
It's not. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I agree. I hate the idea that we paint this picture that we happen to have the unicorn perfect environment. No one works in that unicorn perfect environment.
And it doesn't mean it's a bad environment.
No, not at all. Exactly. Yeah, there's troubles. You're always working on something in a school. That's the thing, isn't it? Like it's never just like, oh, done. Every single person is happy. Every single child is happy as well. Woohoo! Made it. Doesn't happen in
It's
schools.
impossible. Yeah. It's absolutely impossible.
So you thought in the last week of term, a good thing to do. Was get the kids up and riled up, running around in the last week of term right before Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Why not?
I don't know about you, but maybe it's the year group. I've got year 6s. But I feel like at the moment, if I give them an inch. Oh my God, they take 5 miles. Genuinely, like behaviour at the moment. I don't know, again, right into us because we love it, but Christmas term, right before Christmas, balancing that normality with actually having some Christmas fun as well. Like we make Christmas cards and stuff. I find it so tricky because I'm always on edge because there's always someone that just takes advantage. Do you get that in year 4? Surely?
Yeah, all the time. And again, as a teacher, that's part of our job to deal with that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like that, and again, there's 2 forks you can go down. Yeah. The first fork is I'm a bad teacher because these kids are becoming unruly. Don't think that. But it's Christmas. These kids are going to not have perfect learning behaviors right now. Exactly. It's okay. Yeah. And then the second path is have high expectations still, and still call out behavior that's past the line for you. Yeah. Because I've always talked about this line and this really strict line you have to have as a teacher. You have to have this line you expect. It's almost inevitable that in Christmas that line shifts because maybe you put some Christmas music on, right, whilst you're doing an activity which they can sing along to some Christmas songs. But by definition, your line of behaviour, of your learning behaviours you want to see has moved.
Yeah, because you wouldn't normally let them sing it.
If they started singing in a maths lesson, you'd be like, what are you doing, guys? Get on with your work.
Unless it's Hamilton, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's allowed at any point in my classroom. But my point is in Christmas, the teachers and the adults and the school were actively moving that line because we'll say to them, oh, no English or maths today, we're going to the church for a service. Yeah, oh, by the way, no afternoon lesson because we've got Elf Express coming in and we're going to go to see Santa's Grotto and stuff, and there's Christmas fairs going on. Yep. We're moving that line constantly, and we can't move the line and then moan at the kids for not understanding where that line is.
No, I agree, but like equally, like you said, you can't then just get rid of that line. Let it completely erode. I'll tell you a quick funny story that happened to me this week that I just literally thought of right now. We were doing classic that kind of lesson, like we changed our afternoon. It was a bit more fun. We did some Christmas cards, we did some DT.
Sure.
And just literally, I was on hot glue gun station. So when you're like, I'm thinking, I don't want the kids to use this because I know someone's going to stick their hands to their feet. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? And
someone goes to scratch their head. Like, oh god.
Oh no.
Oh god.
Mrs. Stevens put all this glue on my hand for the work, not my head.
Little do people know, it's actually a glue gun incident that caused you to cut your hair off.
Exactly.
That's how you lost it.
Exactly how it happened. That's what I tell the kids. But honestly, I just sat there doing some gluing. I looked over. This is 5 minutes in. 5 minutes in, right? We're barely even started, and they're having a whale of a time. I look over, and there's just a kid in the corner who has wrapped his entire hand with. He's used the whole roll of sellotape that I gave their table. Every table got a roll of sellotape. Whole roll, wrapped his whole hand all the way down through his forearm, and he just looked at me. When they give you that look of. They absolutely know there's nothing they can say to get out of this. They know they've done themselves in right at this moment. They looked at me with that sort of kind of smirk, thinking, "Please find this funny," but also like, "I know I've done wrong." And I was just like, "Come on, man."
Did he just do a Thanos snap?
Yeah,
just make an infinity gauntlet.
No, he didn't because there's too much on it. He couldn't get it off. It took him 5 minutes. Honestly, I was like, "Oh, for God's sake." So yeah, that's what I mean about the madness of this last term. Because you know what, I think if I did DT maybe at the beginning of the term, I don't think even that would have happened.
But even if it did, do you think you would have reacted differently?
Probably.
I want to ask you very quickly.
I
know we're doing like a catch up and stuff. I want to talk about maybe that right now because I'm quite interested. Mm-hmm. I feel like we are. If you think about a traditional teacher, I think we're more laid back on the scale. Okay, in terms of
maybe
in terms of what. So let me explain. Okay. In terms of attitudes. Okay, in terms of strictness and behavior, I'm not talking about that because I think we're quite strict still. Personally, I think we are very strict. In fact, because I don't think strictness means mean. I'm talking about traditional, like I will not shout and demean a child. Ever, really, like unless it's I feel like gosh I need to shout because either you're not listening at all. Or it's safety or something. Like, or something it has to be like a real reason. Whereas I think sometimes other teachers use that as a management tool. I'm going to strike fear into you all the time because I'm the teacher. No, don't do that. My point is there with like someone doing that, right? Literally sellotaping their entire hand up to their elbow, right? Is that an instance where you should really reprimand and be like, just say to a child that is completely unacceptable, not have an ounce of smile or happiness? Or do you still approach that with, God, stop that.
Well, do you want to know what I did?
Where's the line?
Because I feel like I'm somewhere in the middle of that. I did not remotely raise my voice at this kid. Genuinely. I said, what are you doing? He went, oh, and he immediately regretted it. I said, no, stop. He started trying to take it off. I said, no, stop. I said,
keep going.
Leave the room. No, I literally said, leave the room. I said, you're going to go down to the head teacher and you're going to explain to him why you sellotaped your hand at DT. And he went, no, I won't. It's okay. And I said, no, stop. I'm not saying take it all off right now. I said, there needs to be a consequence. Off you go. And he literally went, oh. I was like, no. I said, it's an easy lesson to learn. I said, you'll come back in 5 minutes. Go and tell the head teacher, Mr. Stevens has sent me out because I've sellotaped my whole hand up. And in my head, I'm sort of laughing at this point, to be honest with you. In my head, I'm thinking this is kind of funny. And the head teacher's probably going to find this funny as well. But in my head, I was like, I don't want to just shout at this guy. Like, he's just having a laugh. Yeah. Is it the worst crime in the world? Not really. Did I go home that night thinking, God, I'm so annoyed about that? No, not at all. I wasn't really annoyed. I just thought it's just slightly frustrating that he's just breaking the rules.
There's a lesson to learn still, though, because you just don't do it.
So he went to their teacher, came back 5-10 minutes later with a free hand, and I was like, there you go, you won't do that again. You won't do that again.
Done. Finished.
Done.
Forgotten.
Don't worry about it. And then we cracked on.
And then none of his class have sellotape anymore, so they can't do the DT. But that's fine. Just sit there.
I punished the whole class because of it. But I think that's some sort of middle ground, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my point here is, I guess even 10 years, or as you like to tell me, 9 years into teaching, I still sometimes second guess, about being laid back and stuff sometimes, because I think there's a natural, I'll be really honest, because we're men, I think there's a natural thought process that I don't necessarily think is wrong, that we find it easier to control the children, and we don't have to shout as much.
Yeah.
Because we have just this demeanor of, oh, it's a man teacher. I think sometimes that comes into it, but I think also sometimes it's quite simplistic when people say that to me. It's like, well, of course they behave for you. You're a man. I've had that literally said to me. Of course they behave for you. You're a bloke. Like, you can just cut across them with your voice and or you just your demeanor in the classroom. And I know this child that their dad's more strict with them, so they're going to listen to you more than they listen to me.
Yeah.
I think there's a tinge of truth in some of that, but I also sometimes think maybe I have a different behavior management style that maybe suits these children in a different way.
It oversimplifies it, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, no, but I think
like you're not skilled. It's just because you're a man. It's luck. So, it's not really.
Like I think that's it. It's when people brush it off as it's not you good, it's you lucky. And I think sometimes I'm like, I dip into I second guess myself because of it. I'm like, is that true? Is it the fact that I just get away with it because I'm just a geezer and I say certain things in a certain way?
Yeah.
Or is the way I approach stuff, like you in that situation, you made the conscious choice to approach it in that way. There's nothing to do with who you are. Someone else might have made the conscious approach to really rinse that child and have a proper go at them, make them feel awful and upset and cry.
Properly shout.
And then be like, oh, of course it was okay for you because you're a man. No, you chose to do something different. I wonder how much weight there is in who you are and the demeanor you have just through who you are and the choice of your behavior management style.
Yeah. My honest thoughts on the whole man thing, by the way, I think it's just like any privilege, right? Any privilege in life. I just think there is just a percentage increase probability.
Sure.
That it will make a difference. Yeah. Positive. That's it. I honestly think that it could. There are some classes where it would make no difference whatsoever, man and woman. But I think there's a chance on average. You've got 1,000 different classes. It's probably going to have some impact.
And if I had the exact same behavior style as a woman, that's where the privilege comes in.
Literally have 1,000 classes, maybe like 600 behave for you, because 550 behave for them. Honestly, and it's like, okay, there you go, we found the privilege bias, but it's small, so I don't like it when people simplify it to, oh no, all of this stuff is just because you're a man. It's not really, is it?
It's interesting. It's interesting because I'm completely on board with the fact I absolutely understand there is some privilege there.
Yeah, of course.
But I just think I think you can go too far the other way and undermine a choice and a skill. Do you know what I mean?
You're only getting that promotion because you're a man.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay.
Sometimes true.
Yeah.
Honestly, yes. But like just to say on every single promotion someone gets, it's just because of that. That's obviously also a bit simplistic.
Yeah, and a bit offensive.
And it would also be offensive to say you only got that promotion because you're a woman and you're just ticking a gender equality box and stuff. Yeah. I'd never say that. That's horrible. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
So just think about it maybe a little bit.
Just don't say either way.
Yeah. But call it out if it's real and it's true and you have evidence and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to a bit of a rabbit hole.
Strange one here.
But my point is I sometimes feel myself second guessing stuff because of that.
Yeah. So before we move on to the main part, because I think we enjoyed it last week. Do you remember last week when I had a few rile up Dylan things to go and you were getting worried that the time was getting on? Can I do that last one?
Yeah.
Can I tell you something that I saw online that I thought would annoy you?
Maybe we'll turn this into a frequent thing.
Yeah, maybe. If it's not, do you know what? Most weeks, I reckon.
We need a jingle for it, like a specific one.
Yeah, we do, don't we?
I'm not going to sing.
We are nearly 100 episodes in. We've still not really thought about doing anything like that, have we?
When we started this podcast, do you remember? You were like, we need to have sections, like defined sections that we do every week. And it's like, oh, no, we don't, baby.
Oh, we could. Or we could put no effort in. Anyway, right. So here we go. Saw this online. Someone said, the headline caught me straight away. Can you request not to move up a pay point? And I thought, here we go. Teaching's the only career this is going to happen in, right? Currently, UPS 2, wondering if I could request to not move to UPS 3, despite it being on the cards. At my school, it feels like UPS 3 is just used with a stick to beat experienced teachers. Oh, you're UPS 3, so you've got to do these extra things. Well, you should have done that because you're UPS 3, blah, blah, blah. You've heard all that sort of stuff. So the question is literally then, can I request to stay on UPS 2 and then not be lumped with extra work with UPS 3? What's your feelings on that? Because there's a million different comments, which I won't go into.
Yeah. Well, straight away, when I hear anything to do with upper pay scale and it justifying more work outside of the job, I'm under the impression that it's been repeatedly refuted that UPS means you have to do more stuff, actual physical, like leading maths or leading a year group or leading a key stage. I think it's used very frequently for that incorrectly. I think a lot of schools will say, well, you're UPS, so
you can lead English.
XYZ. You've got to do all this extra stuff. And it's like, well, why do you think TLRs exist?
Yeah.
Honestly. Like a TLR literally exists for a teaching and learning responsibility, which is separate to UPS. From what I've seen from union advice and guidance and stuff, is that the upper pay scale is literally just a way of boosting up your experienced teachers, because they are exactly that. And they have an impact on the wider school, which can be through many ways.
Yeah.
Not simply just leading a subject. You can have an impact through the wider school through sharing your planning.
Yeah.
You can have an impact from, mentoring an NQT or something.
Yeah.
Like,
and even
which you might just do
informally
in
as
your
well.
class.
I hate that those things get missed, right? The passive, informal experience that comes to teaching.
Running an assembly.
Doing that, or even just being able to just do something on the spot.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an emergency. I need someone to run assembly right now. It's not been planned. Okay, that member of staff, you're way more experienced. You're probably going to be able to do that. Like little passive things, even just being in the year group, right? You get 4 people in the year group. There's an NQT in it. There's a really experienced member, and the NQT goes to the experienced member just occasionally, informally,
That's exactly
totally
what I
off
mean.
the books.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, how did you do that lesson there? I do it still. I work with someone who's 30 years in this game, and I regularly go to her when it's things like DT and where I'm not as confident. And I'm like, how did you teach that one? What did you give all the kids this? Did you lay out on tables? And she'll just tell me, and I'll be like, cool, banging, that's really good advice. That's what it's for, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not for taking your TLR.
There's got to be a reward for being an experienced teacher. We've talked about this a million times. This is another example of one of the reels we posted where people were very much like, yes, that's brilliant. And other people were like, you don't teach for reward.
Yeah.
You should be doing it for the kids. Stop. If you're a really experienced teacher, there is genuinely nothing past the top of the main pay scale unless you go to this upper pay scale.
Yeah.
So the idea of the upper pay scale should literally just be rewarding that experience.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be a transaction where, okay, I'll bump you up, but you need to give me 10 hours back a week to lead English. No, it's a reward for being experienced. And are we gonna solve retention? Are we actually going to solve retention? Well, this is a tiny part of that which you're wanting to take away.
Yeah.
So this itself won't solve retention. Just giving someone extra $2,000 a year, it's not going to solve retention, but it's going to go a certain way to just feeling a bit more valued.
Yeah, it helps a bit. It does help a bit.
So don't get rid of it, because just because it's not going to solve a problem, it will make it worse though if we pretend that it's
part of the solution. It's not the whole solution.
Yeah.
Do you think we should get rid of UPS 1, 2, 3 and honestly just have M1 to M9? Just have a continuous scale. Like, why do we even have this threshold?
I think it would probably be a good thing in terms of it would get rid of this idea that you have to do something extra. I'm convinced, teachers listening to this, maybe you can say, oh my gosh, yes, I completely agree. I am completely convinced that there is absolutely no reason at all why like upper management, government, DFE, Ofsted, there's a reason why they haven't actually gone about trying to change stuff like this to help workload and well-being and things like that. There's a reason why they'll put out a report and say, yeah, we do too much. Why don't you stop photocopying? That doesn't actually help well-being whatsoever, and doesn't actually reduce workload, and doesn't actually go as far as something we said last week about putting in an overtime thing for teaching or just having set hours. There's a reason why it's so flimsy and grey, because it benefits them. It benefits them that schools are using UPS for this kind of transactional agreement, that you're going to go through UPS, you need to give me more work, because there's no money for that work to get done. So they pretend that the UPS is for that. There is a benefit to exploiting teachers and workers in this way. And the benefit is more stuff gets done, and it's at the detriment of teachers' well-being. So if you're at the top and you're thinking, okay, we can really actually change teachers' well-being and actually reduce their workload, but we don't have any extra money, so that is just going to mean that less happens for the children. And English isn't led as well. Or the discos don't happen after school. Or the clubs aren't run for the children. They're making that choice to detriment a teacher's well-being over impacting a child's outcome.
Yeah.
And the point has to be here that you could argue all day that the children's outcome is more important than the teacher's well-being, but that's what's getting us into this crisis right now. So if you're going to actually fix it, you've got to make hard decisions that involve money being put in the right place.
Problem, isn't it?
And if it doesn't involve money being put in the right place, because you're saying we literally don't have the money, what I'm saying is then you literally have to lower the expectations.
Yeah.
I've talked about this a million times. It's a seesaw. The expectations of the teacher and the money we put in, at the minute, it's way too heavily put into what's expected of the people. And the only way to solve it, sure, no money. Okay, well, we have to lower the expectations then, because we cannot keep going. And this is just one symptom of that, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This is one symptom of how we are just exploiting people to get more and more work out of them. When you can say no, you can go to UPS 3 and do no more than you're doing on UPS 2, just because you're more experienced and you're a better teacher because of it.
Yeah. And it keeps you in the job. Honestly, that is enough for me. After everything you said, there was amazing, and I was already convinced that it might help retain me though. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Do you want a really good teacher in the school? There you go. Give him a couple more grand. Done. UPS 3. But I don't know. I think your analogy was really good, because my gut feeling is scrap that system. But I can see why they absolutely keep UPS 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. But even like you look at us, like it is broken. Yeah. Me and you, we're 9 and 10 years in. So technically, technically, if we had a pay rise every single year, we would both be on UPS 3 right now.
Sure.
Neither of us on UPS 3.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
So I'd say I'm quite bullshit. Like I've pushed for trying to move up. I've to other people probably 10 years in are still on M6.
Yeah.
They've never moved into the upper threshold
because they're scared of this.
They're either scared of this, like this sort of thing, or their school. And I know this has happened because I've literally had a conversation with someone in the past who said, I've been given the option. I can't believe this is real. Like thinking back, right? Someone said to me, I've been given the option. I'm on M6. I'm currently on M6 and I have a TLR for leading a subject. If I go to UPS, my head teacher said, you can go to UPS, but you won't get your TLR anymore. So you can go to UPS 1, you still lead the subject as part of UPS, but you won't get your TLR. So it's the same money.
Yep.
So you still, and they convinced them so you're still getting your TLR, it's just embedded into your main pay now. So it's no longer an extra thing we can take away. It's now that's the benefit, mate. It's no longer a separate thing. It's part of your actual main pay now. How good is that, eh? So take UPS 1.
That's unbelievable.
And it's like, and obviously they were just like, they took the UPS 1, they took that option, and then it's like, cool, there you go. Well done, you've manipulated your teacher into going up literally just a pay point because they deserve it, and you've taken away the extra money, and that's still doing the work. And that's what they did. And at the time, I remember being like, okay. Weighing up the two options like they were both fair, like they were the only things that could possibly happen. Being like, I agree, I think you should do that one. Mentor, I wish I could go back now and be like, no, go to your school and be like, oh, that's actually not what UPS is for, by the way. Here's the freaking paperwork.
It's like my favorite one always with this is Teacher Standard 8. I love going back to that because it's used so much. And I remember, like you, being young, being NQT, because that's what it was called back then, ECT now. And my mentor literally saying to me, you should do the disco because it'll mean I can tick box 8. I just remember being like, I at the time, I was like, sure. I look back now and I'm like, you just needed an extra pair of hands for the disco.
Yeah, that didn't tick off a single thing.
Nothing to do with me being a good teacher or not.
That's not contributed to where you are now.
Oh well, you're not. Well, you've done amazing assessment work and you teach the kids really well, but you didn't go to disco, so can't tick off TSA.
I love the sort of retrospective like way of thinking where it's like, if you didn't do that, would you still be where you are now? Yeah, absolutely. Did it impact any? Did it really impact any decisions?
It did, because I did some amazing knee slides, and those kids were jealous, man. They were jealous. That really helped me build a relationship with the children.
Yeah.
God, mentor.
Brilliant. Anyway, well, the second half of this episode is all about maths. I'm really looking forward to talking about it.
Same. We've had our usual, funny chit chat.
Yeah.
Now we're actually going to try and get semi-serious, I suppose. And we are maths leads, so let's talk about teaching really good maths. You and I are maths leads in our school. We were trained as maths specialists. Maths is our thing. I think we're fair to say that, sometimes we get an expert on the podcast and we're like, cool, we're going to let you talk about this because we just have opinions. You're the expert.
Yeah.
So I've got an expert in for this. It's us.
It's me. Not you, mate. It's just me. Oh, sorry. You're the one that has maths specialist on your degree, aren't you? Yeah.
But in all seriousness, you've clicked on this podcast because very much we're going to talk about teaching maths and how to teach maths well. And we're going to go through everything we've learned over the years. What the purpose of teaching maths is, what a maths lesson should look like, what we have to involve, the kind of actual bits around the curriculum, how do I make sure there's progression and things like that, what good maths teaching looks like, and just bits in general. And we're going to try and get rid of some misconceptions. I think that's a big part of this.
Yeah, we're going to squash some of those. That's what I was about to say. Yeah. That'd be good.
So maths in general then, Hayden, what would you say is the purpose in terms of you're sat down, you're a school teacher, you've got to teach maths. Very often it's every single day. It's a huge part of the curriculum. Why is that? What is the purpose?
And a kid says to you, why do we learn this? Because that's happened. That's happened. And sometimes people don't know what the answer is. Yeah. The purpose of teaching maths, to me, is what I would say to the children, is it's real world skills, it's problem solving, it's developing your brain, you're understanding how to solve problems in the real world. That's normally the textbook response I give to children. Would you add anything to that? If you were talking to an adult, perhaps, that says, what is the real purpose of teaching maths?
I'd say from an adult's point of view, a big part of your job when you're teaching maths is to try and reduce the anxiety around a subject as much as possible. You look at adults, and I think it's very normal for adults to say, I don't do maths. I don't do numbers, and no one bats an eyelid. If someone turned around and said, I don't do reading, it doesn't happen. There's much more of a, of course everyone reads, and if you don't, then you feel really insecure about that.
And we're not talking about just like choosing to read books.
No.
I don't do reading. I can't read. I can't read at all. I don't
exactly do it. That. Like if you are illiterate, that's something where there's like things in place. Like everyone should aim to be completely literate because it's really important. With maths, there's definitely a much lower threshold, and I think that induces a bit of anxiety as a child, which leads to that indifference when you're older. So if you're anxious about maths when you're younger and you feel like you're failing, when you're older, you will deal with that by suppressing it and saying, well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Well, in real life, do you know what? It's so helpful to have solid foundational math skills. And in primary school specifically is where we have to really nail those foundations as much as possible. So I agree with everything you said. It's all about the real word. It's about the idea of solving problems. We'll come on to that.
Yeah.
But it is about just being able to do maths, work out your change. How much money do you have to go shopping? What time is the bus?
Yeah.
Things like that.
So do you think the national curriculum is set out to do this? Do you think it has the right aims?
I think the aims of the national curriculum are really good.
Yeah.
I think if you just take that as a piece of paper on its own and you read it, I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I think we can talk through the aims.
Yeah,
maybe.
What are the aims?
So literally written in the national curriculum. This is where the 3 parts of maths come from. If you're a primary school teacher, you've done any maths CPD. You're thinking of, okay, there's 3 parts of maths: fluency, reasoning, problem solving.
Yeah.
And it comes directly from the aims of the curriculum. So the aim of the curriculum, we'll start with fluency.
Yeah,
okay,
sure,
the idea of fluency is practicing things over and over again, basically becoming good at maths, being able to do maths, and not only be able to do maths, but to do that maths in different circumstances and situations. And we call that as a teacher varied fluency. So the aim is children are able to do maths.
Yeah.
That's basically the first aim.
In English, right? When you say you're fluent in English, I wouldn't say a kid is fluent in English because they can write one single sentence structure over and over again, right? It's about, okay, you can write these words and you're fluent at the language and you can write them in loads of different ways. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at with this idea of varied fluency, right?
That's a really good analogy. And I think when you think about if someone's fluent in English, do they know every single word in the dictionary? No, of course not. I'm fluent in English and I definitely don't know every single word. Yeah. I definitely couldn't write like Shakespeare. Do you know what I mean? But fluency is something that all children can achieve.
Yeah.
In the same way fluency in reading is something all children. It doesn't mean you absolutely know everything to do with maths ever. You're completely fluent in whatever.
Yeah.
It means you've reached the threshold where, you can add numbers together. Yeah, of course you can work out how much time is left until the hour and things like that. Fluency is an aim, and this is an aim for all children. I think something that sometimes gets missed. The idea is all children should be hitting these aims. Okay, and fluency, I think that analogy of reading.
So could just squash a little misconception then, because I think it's very normal to think that fluency equals arithmetic only.
Right.
Is that right? Is that wrong? Is there some truth in that?
I think a big part of fluency is what we would call arithmetic.
Yeah.
A big part of fluency is, can you add 2 numbers together? Can you exchange? Do you understand the process of doing that? Can you get answers right repeatedly? But it's more than arithmetic, because it kind of bleeds in. These aims, as we talk through the rest of them, they do bleed in with each other.
Yeah.
Because when we're talking about fluency, it might be that the children can practice adding some numbers together, but then it might move very quickly to, okay, well, what about if the missing number was at the start, and then we have an equal sign, and then the addition? That's part of fluency, because it's about understanding that, it's still doing the maths here. It's just in a slightly different context.
Sure.
Maybe there's a part-whole model.
Yeah.
So for this time, I'm missing the whole, and then the 2 parts are here. I'm going to have to put them together, and I'm still going to be doing the same maths. I'm still going to be fluent in it. I'm still reading the sentence in a different structure.
You're still teaching it to them on the on the screen or on your board, and they're then practicing that exact skill that you've done.
Exactly.
That's fluency.
That's fluency. It's the building blocks of maths.
Yeah.
You can't do the other aims of the curriculum until you're fluent in something.
Yeah.
You literally can't do it. So that's the first aim. Children become fluent in their curriculum.
Yeah.
Second aim, reasoning. So reasoning is like the next step up.
Sure.
So when we talk about reasoning, what we mean is we're talking about being able to explain.
Yeah.
Being able to dive a little bit deeper into thinking logically about something. You can make connections. You can justify an answer. You can extrapolate out and prove something. So it's not just doing the maths anymore. It's looking at something and potentially saying how that went wrong.
I think it's the most important part of the curriculum, by the way, because I remember, years ago when we were at university, I then went on to do my masters. I'm just saying, and one of the big things that was really interesting was looking at anxiety. You talk about anxiety and it was looking at that generation above us who there's tons of maths anxiety in it, and one of the findings was that it was very arithmetic based and rote based and not much about the reasoning. It was kind of like, here's a trick that helps you to answer this question. The trick is completely abstract.
Yeah.
You have no conceptual understanding of what's going on here, but if you do this trick, you times those 2 together, you draw a smiley face under that one, and then you dot these 2 numbers, and then you put the 2 dots together. Like some weird trick, right?
If
you draw a butterfly around the numbers, then it works.
Yeah.
There's no conceptual understanding. They have no reasoning skills. So to me, reasoning is like the forefront of everything when I'm thinking about kids and doing maths.
Conceptual understanding reasoning hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's going that one step further as a teacher. It's not just spending the lesson adding two numbers together. I'm going to go to adding because it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's not just a lesson adding two numbers together in different ways. That's still fluency. Okay, you're going to do it in different ways. Okay, it's presented differently. It's in a part whole model. It's in a bar model. Even in a word problem can still be fluency. It really can, because you're teaching it and you're just getting better at actually doing the maths.
Yeah.
We'll come on to problem solving in a minute, because I think that's a misconception we're going to talk about. But yeah, conceptual understanding, that is reasoning. It's stopping and it's saying, what is this one worth?
Yeah.
When we exchange over the one, what are we actually doing here? It's not one, is it? So
why?
no, it's 110.
Yeah.
Well, why do we have 110? Well, because we added the ones up and it bridged past 10. So in 14, that 4 stays in the ones column, and I've actually swapped those 10 ones for a 10. And it's the kind of thing that parents look at now, and we explain like, why are they doing this modern maths, this rubbish maths? I don't know to explain. Why am I going to sit and write a sentence in maths? I'm just going to do some adding.
Yeah.
No, the point is, if you really have a solid grasp of that exchanging, when it comes to then doing short multiplication or even short division, and you're exchanging over 7 sometimes, literally, the idea is, okay, I know that's 72 and I know that's 7 tens, and that's going to help me conceptually understand that idea of exchanging, where when it comes to doing short division and short multiplication, etc., I as a teacher don't need to teach them this new trick, because it's not just carrying the one. If I taught my kids, just put the one over, they have no idea it comes from the fact it's 14.
They could probably get the answer right in those exact questions.
Yeah, exactly. But it just enriches their understanding, and it makes connections, like we're talking about with fluency, and it just embeds that learning.
People always do that diagram, and it's cliche, it's kind of cringy, the whole foundation thing, like a pyramid sort of thing. But it really is that, genuinely. If you have a really bitty foundation where you've not taught much of it, but you've taught your kids tricks, it will fall down eventually, and you will find later on, like you said, when you're teaching other objectives, when they're not able to make those links, it will be just as painful. Yeah,
and I think you're absolutely right, and explaining it's a big part. Language is a huge part of reasoning. Explaining what's going on is actually impossible for a child unless they've been taught the vocabulary to do it. So don't expect reasoning to be a quick fix.
No.
You can dip back into reasoning, and if you're in year 4, for example, you can dip back to a year 3 or year 2 objective to get them really explaining something they properly understand. You've got to be able to do something first. You've got to be able to exchange before you can explain what exchanging is. So you really need to, like you said, build up those blocks. And things like sentence stems can help children. Vocabulary word banks can really help them. It's not something you're just suddenly going to listen to this and go, okay, I need to do more reasoning. Can you explain that?
Give them some questions.
Yeah,
and
a child, they just won't know.
Do you know? We had Gareth Metcalf on this podcast, honestly, like a year ago. Really, really good episode. But he is someone I would, if you want somewhere to start, like a quick, easy win, he has resources called IC Reasoning. He has some other stuff as well. And his resources are so good, genuinely, for that. I remember using them early in my career as a teacher, because he poses questions in a way where it's like, here, some of my favorite reasoning examples, right, are where you give kids a fact. You give them, okay, right, 18 times 5, okay, you say it's 90. And then you say, it's not about them solving it. You just say, okay, explain how I can do 19 times 5 without doing any formal multiplication. Stuff like that, to me, is reasoning, because it's like, okay, do the kids really, truly understand the concept of it's 18 lots of 5 or it's 5 lots of 18? And how they could use the idea of lots of, if you're adding one more lot of, it's repeated addition, and it's linked to that. And it's like, okay, if you taught addition really well back in the day when they did that, and they understand a repeated addition, well done, you've now got an easier ride here. And it goes back to that analogy of you building a good foundation. So reasoning is just constantly getting the kids to justify their understanding and giving them new ways of looking at things, so they really make a strong connection with the maths that they're learning to other parts of maths, and also just a deep conceptual understanding of that maths, not just a surface level. They can pass the test though. Do you know what? Don't care. If you really care about the kids understanding maths and like the whole, going back to the purpose, not being anxious when they're older and solving real life problems, then you have to care about their conceptual understanding just as much as can they pass the test.
It's such an amazing analogy, because I'm thinking right now of that has real life connotations where, for example, let's say you're building something or measuring something in a room. The idea of going back to scratch and showing you're fluent in something isn't useful anymore. You've already done a bunch of the maths. Do you understand maths enough where you can just go, just add 5? That link, that is completely different to fluency. And if your child is only doing fluency in their class, in their lessons for maths, they're never ever going to make that link. And that's such a strong indication to me. That's a perfect example of reasoning. Which, because again, I think reasoning, sometimes people just think, explain how you did that, and that's it. That's a type of reasoning, but if that's the only reasoning your children are getting, that is weak. Like if your reasoning is literally just loads of fluency in a lesson, and then at the end saying, how did you do this? I added up the ones and then I had a 10 and I exchanged it. That's cool. There's a place for that. But your type of reasoning you just said there is making links and connections and thinking things through and justifying and proving. Like a big part of reasoning isn't just explaining what you're doing. It's proving why it worked. It's proving why someone's wrong. And again, I do think we're going to talk about assessment later, but when you look at the SATs and the classic thought bubble questions they do in year 6, quite often they are a bit like that. You'll have a question which is like, so big they couldn't possibly do it in their head, like 398 times 17. And they'll say, explain how you could work out 18 times 398. And it just flips it a bit. And that is pure reasoning. And children fail on that when they haven't remotely been exposed to what you're talking about. Like, unless they have a really solid understanding, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think for me, reasoning is sprinkled throughout every lesson. I really do think that reasoning is something that you might not see on a Tuesday if you walk in at 10:30 a.m. because it's not timetabled in. We don't timetable in reasoning, and we'll talk about problem solving. But reasoning is something where it just goes hand in hand with fluency for me. That idea of just you can only become fluent in something as you're becoming able to explain something. And it is just that whilst reasoning I think comes after fluency, I do think during it you're kind of molding it together into a ball.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because more often, and we'll talk about problem solving now, more oftenly it gets banded. Fluency is very separate and it gets banded reasoning and problem solving. And I think I certainly at the start of my career for years, I'd say, genuinely, if you asked me what's the difference between reasoning and problem solving, I wouldn't have been able to tell you. I really did just think they were the same thing, and they were just kind of like a term that's been put together of them. So let's talk about problem solving then. What is problem solving? And I'm sure you'll make it obvious when you're talking, but why is it different to this idea of reasoning, conceptual understanding?
Well, I think, let's just really go over what we just said, because I think it's important to understand problem solving. That fluency and reasoning to me are two sides of the same coin. I really do think in my head, as I've become more adept at teaching maths, reasoning has moved much closer to problem solving in my head. And it is just something you're constantly doing. I do think that you could at most lessons walk into a room and at some point, at least if it's just partner talk, even if you're introducing something for the first time and really looking at the varied fluency idea, there's going to be reasoning built in if it's being taught really well, in my opinion. I think the way I can justify how problem solving is different, I think you could come into my classroom 1 or 2 or 3 days in a row and not necessarily see any problem solving. I think problem solving is the end goal. I think problem solving is incredibly important. I think it's where everyone should aim to be, where your children are becoming problem solvers. And I don't think it matters how good the children are at maths. Their aim has to be problem solvers at whatever level they're working at. Okay. So problem solving to me, and I think this is a widely accepted definition of problem solving, is being able to apply skills you've built up mathematically to unfamiliar problems.
That's the key word, isn't it?
That's the key word. It's only problem solving if the children are not familiar with what they've got in front of them.
Give me a classic example of what's not problem solving then. What's the most common thing where people say this is problem solving and it isn't?
Okay, I'm going to put two things in one here. Okay, and I really don't want to dig out people who do this because I did this for many years in my career. I can completely understand why people do it. And I think there's room for it again. But I don't think it's very good practice, and neither do Ofsted. And I think when we're thinking about applying the curriculum, it's something we should try and avoid. Now, as we become more proficient at understanding what's going on. I don't like seeing word problem Fridays. This was a big thing. Problem solving Friday, word problem Friday. And the whole idea was it was to try and shoehorn in some problem solving so you tick the
make sure it's happening.
Fine. Brilliant. Bad practice, in my opinion. So what you might often see people say is problem solving is, well, it's in a word problem, it's problem solving. It's not true. Okay. The biggest thing, I did this at the start of my career, so I'm going to talk about myself here. So I'm digging myself out before anyone gets annoyed at me. If you do this as well, maybe we should just think about it together. I used to do my maths lesson. I'd do some fluency, what I thought was fluency, like maybe do some practice. 3 different ways of showing it, cool. Then I'd do a question after which says, explain how this person did this wrong. And to me, that was my reasoning. I tick that off. And then my challenge, always would just put it as my challenge every day. I'm going to think of a problem solving one here because the kids who finish can get onto the problem solving. And the problem solving question is just a 2-step word problem where they just do what they did at the start of the lesson in the context of a word problem. Oh, and by the way, one of my slides and my input was this word problem with different numbers. So many reasons why it's not problem solving. If you've literally shown the children the structure of a word problem and how to solve it and just change the number, by definition, it's not unfamiliar anymore. It's just them regurgitating there's no problem solving involved. Okay. And the second thing is every child should be doing problem solving. So if your problem solving is in your challenge, or what you say is your problem solving, by definition, not everyone's going to get to the challenge, as it wouldn't be that. It's extra work for children to do well. And you're depriving your children who are struggling a bit more the chance to problem solve.
Okay, I'm going to hit you back then with a common response to that. But my kids that are struggling aren't fluent enough to do the problem solving in that lesson yet.
So again, what we say to our staff, and I think it's really important to make this clear to your staff, and I don't think you're a bad maths teacher if you think that. I think that's
I think it's a logical
thing. Because do you know what? You cannot problem solve until you can do the maths. I completely agree with you. So I'd say to this person, you're absolutely right. What we need to do is build in time for these children to be doing some problem solving on age appropriate level of maths for them. So let's say they're in year 4 and they're working at a year 2 level, and you say, oh, they don't access this year 4 curriculum. How can they possibly problem solve? They're still becoming fluent.
Yeah.
I'd say you're right. It would be a waste of time to give them problem solving.
To give them year 4 problem solving questions.
So go to year 2.
Yeah.
You know, can your child add 7 past 10? Can they do like 8 plus 7? Okay, and you'll be like, yeah, sure. They can use a number line, and they can use a 10 square, and they can go past, and they can do that. Okay, cool. Here's a bank of year 2 problem solving questions for addition and subtraction. There'll be something in there where they can do the maths, and then all their focus is on problem solving. So I would say to them, look, everyone needs to problem solve. It just needs to be problem solving something they're fluent in. If they're not quite fluent in it yet, don't do problem solving. And that's what I mean when I say even your children who are in your year group on the year 4 curriculum, in this case in year 4 class, they still might not be ready to problem solve after one lesson. It's okay to not see it. You might see problem solving on a Tuesday, and then you might see it again on a Thursday. You might not see it till the Friday after. It has to be appropriate.
When we had Ofsted in, one of the big things, we were doing a lot of research at the time. I think it was from like Third Space Learning or something like that. Put together.
I'm going to reference it in a second.
Oh, brilliant! Well, the condensed version of the Ofsted. Okay, so.
No. I'm going to reference something else. Third Space Learning is fantastic. I'm going to reference a different thing, but they've got so much stuff.
Well, they'd read all the Ofsted. There was tons of Ofsted guidance about how they want to see maths, right? The deep dives and all this stuff, and they put it into a nice document to read. I remember one of the big things was like a do's and don'ts list. It was Ofsted will be like a red flag to them if they see that you've planned problem solving into every single lesson. And in like on the surface, that sounds like what are they talking about? And it's the reason it's a red flag is because it honestly, it's so like based on everything Dylan just said. By definition, then it's very, very, very hard to have your kids constantly fluent in every single thing you're teaching ever in every lesson that they can do problem solving immediately in that lesson. It's not going to happen. It realistically won't happen. It might take a few days of building up that fluency and reasoning together before you can say, right, I think it's there. I think you are fluent enough that I can give you an unfamiliar problem, and you're going to be able to pull all that new learning to the forefront of your brain and combine it all together to solve this problem. I couldn't have done that yesterday because honestly, you just weren't there yet. You just were not fluent enough. It would have been confusing. You would have then developed anxiety around this. It would have been a fail. So yeah, it was interesting that Ofsted actively went out of the way to be like, this is not a good thing. Like schools need to stop saying to their teachers, oh, we need to see problem solving every single day, and then everyone does the challenge question, like you said. It's just a misconception.
So we talked about how it's not just necessarily word problems. We talked about how we don't necessarily need to see it every day. And I think I'm going to pick up on what you said there about how you need to be fluent before you can do problem solving. And the idea is that if you're fluent in the maths, you've got one less thing to cognitively load in your mind.
True. So
when it comes to problem solving, you can spend a lot of the time on actually problem solving, okay? And trying to diagnose what to do with this problem.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to reference Third Space Learning. They put together this PDF, and it, like for years now, I've had it printed off, and I just keep it in my mind constantly. I'm thinking about this. And it's the 9 ways of tackling a problem.
Oh, yeah, cool.
And we're going to go through it now because lots of people will be listening to this, like I was a few years ago when I had my mind opened to what problem solving actually was. And I remember just thinking to myself, okay, well, if it's not word problems and stuff, well, what is problem solving?
What is it? Tell me what it is. Yeah.
So problem solving, we should be thinking about it as in focusing on the skills required to solve a problem.
Sure.
Not, here's a problem, here's how it works, apply it with different numbers. Not problem solving. Problem solving, it's so vague. It's hard. But if you focus on the skills involved, you can make sure your children have like a wide diet of problem solving. And I'm going to go through all 9 right here in technique. And I'm going to give an example of what it might look like. Okay. So I'm going to talk about first technique 1, open-ended problems. Okay. This can be a problem in itself. Just literally an open-ended problem. For example, an example of this would be, you might be doing, you've just done some area and perimeter. You're like at the end of that unit now. You think your children are really solid with area and perimeter. They understand what the words mean and what they are. You can say to your children, okay, the area of a rectangle is 24 centimeters squared. What are the length of its sides?
Okay, so there's not one answer.
There's not one answer.
There's not one answer, yeah.
So as a teacher then, you know they're proficient with what area is. They know that they can draw a rectangle out. They know opposite sides on a rectangle are the same. All of that base knowledge is there. Their entire focus then is on trying things out, open-ended, more than one option.
This is a good example of where reasoning and problem solving do join up. That to me is a perfect example of, okay, that is where a child, now reasoning is this floater in the middle where generally we teach it with fluency. That's a good example of where they're using both. They have to reason, they have to explain why there's multiple answers, they have to explain why, well, if I half this side, this one might double, that kind of thing, you know.
But it's a problem because as a teacher, you should be building in an environment where they haven't seen this question before. They don't know. They've got no tangible way of like, well, sir showed me a minute ago to draw a rectangle.
Yeah.
No, let them try it out themselves. Cool. That is the art of problem solving. And why is it important? Not because in a test this is gonna come up again. By definition, it's unfamiliar. By definition, so it's not teaching to a test. This is why it gets so warped. It gets so warped into being a 2-mark question they might see on the SATs. That's your problem solving. No, it's not though, is it? Problem solving is literally by definition something that they won't see before and won't necessarily see again in that context.
Yeah, good. What's number 2?
Next one, use logical reasoning. So by this I mean, I'm thinking of those word riddles where it's like, one cinema has X amount of people in it and the other cinema has 13 fewer. Cinema 4 has half the amount of Cinema 2, and you're getting all this information, and you've got to try and organize it, be logical, what comes ahead of what, and that idea of just being logical itself, it's not in the curriculum.
It might be that the third line, Cinema 3, is your kind of start point because it tells you Cinema 3 has 50 seats or whatever, and it's like, okay, now I know that I can go back to line 1 because that told me that Cinema 1 has half of Cinema 3, and then when I know that one I can then work out 4 and then I can find the total.
And what you can sprinkle in with these questions is whilst it's still problem solving, you can sprinkle in what you've recently done. If you've recently done multiples, have it twice as much, 7 times as much, half as much if you've done halving and stuff. You can basically tailor your problem solving to have maths in it that your children have become fluent in, to really then focus on the idea of, okay, being logical and still applying what they've done, still doing maths that's relevant to the curriculum. Next one, working backwards. Think about those inverse machines you get, but it might be written in words this time. So you might say, Sally's just had her birthday. She's 3 years younger than Pete, and Pete's half the age of Bob. Bob just celebrated his 42nd birthday.
Yeah, and you got to work backwards to get back to the original age.
Exactly. It's different because there's one linear way of getting there, but how the children are going to do that, they're going to do one at a time. Have you just done inverse together?
Can I tell you a really good example of this in year 6? As a year 6 teacher, I see it every single year, and it's such a good way of me understanding whether a child understands fractions of amounts properly. Fractions of amounts is a year 4 objective, if you're not too sure of that. So by year 6, we do kind of expect them to be fairly confident and fluent with that, right? And as soon as I give, even like a top set, if you're doing setting, maths group, a question that's like 1/3 of a number is 12, or even harder, 3/4 of a number is 12. What was the original number? That's that kind of idea. That to me is such a good problem to give a kid once they've become fluent in finding fractions of amounts, because it really requires them to think about their conceptual understanding. And if you've just taught them a trick, divide by the denominator, times by the top, and you've never, ever, ever showed them anything else, right? They just know that trick works. They will not know how to solve that problem.
And again, I'm going to whiz through the rest now because we're going to link down below the document. It's well worth reading if you want to look into problem solving.
Do like a really quick example of each
one. Yeah, for example but what I'm saying here is the different techniques we're going to talk about and I'm going to whiz through now can be used multiple for one question. So you're talking about there, it's kind of like inverse, working backwards, understanding something. I'd also say in that case, technique 4, for example, is draw a diagram.
Yeah.
I'd be drawing a diagram there. I'd be drawing the quarters out. I'd be doing a bar model if it's necessary. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just like these techniques we're talking about here. They're not just like pick one and do it. It's like a bookshelf. You might take 3.
And you need to model them, right? Is your overall point here is we can teach these individual skills, and once we've taught all 9 of these skills, they'll be better at problem solving with genuine unfamiliar stuff.
Because then it's completely unfamiliar. They might say, well, okay, I'll try, for example, technique 9, trial and improvement. I'll literally just whack a number in, see if it works. That could work for the inverse machine, working backwards. They might try and work backwards. That doesn't quite work for them. Okay, well, my teachers taught me all these techniques of problem solving. Let me try just putting a number in. And the whole point here is if they become proficient in these different techniques of problem solving, again, click on the link for the rest of them because there's a few in there, drawing a table, being organized, spotting a pattern. The idea is that's a toolbook then for them. Not only can they solve problems in class, when they're older, think of all of these things here. If you can visualize stuff well, if you can try something out, the amount of times we use trial and improvement in everyday life, honestly, we're
all the time.
And we're estimating things and we go shopping and we say, well, things will be this much roughly. And we don't work in exacts all the time, but it's problem solving. Same in the rough ballpark. Can I draw a table out? Can I draw something out? If I'm trying to understand something, I love getting a piece of paper and just drawing stuff. And then that for me in my brain solves that problem because I can see it differently. So the point here is problem solving is the most important part of the curriculum. You're building a toolbox for life. When someone says, why in school did they teach me about 24 centimeters squared and what the perimeter would be? Why didn't they teach me about my taxes? They did teach you about your taxes because they taught you the maths and they taught you how to problem solve. It's like the history degree thing.
That's interesting.
When people come to me and say, you've got a history degree, have you? I bet you, do you know everything ever? No, they didn't teach me everything ever. You could pick something like, why did you teach me exactly this about African history, pre-colonial times? Because that's what I chose to do. But you know what I learned? I learned the skills
how to research,
of how to take bias into account, of how to go to the library, how to interpret sources,
it's so true,
how to write an essay. Those skills now I could pick up and apply to 19th century Hungary if I wanted to. But I built those skills up. So if someone comes to me and say, why didn't they teach you about this in your history degree? They didn't need to. They taught me the skills required to be able to learn about it. Same with your taxes. Same with your other things. Look, I think there's space for stuff like that in the curriculum when they're older, don't get me wrong. But it winds me up a bit when people say, they didn't teach me this exact thing. No, because it's a process. And that's why the aims of the maths curriculum are fluency, reasoning, and problem solving. And it's why if you look at the purpose of the maths curriculum, it is embedded in real life problem solving, because we can't teach you how to do everything. Because when you're 8, you don't quite understand compound interest and how to invest or how to do your income returns. But what you can do is start to learn how to do trial improvement, start to learn how to understand something, start to learn how to draw a picture to get something in your mind a bit clearer. These are the problem solving skills that allow mathematicians to grow and interpret the real world.
Yeah. But in English, sir, same thing. In English, sir, why did you teach me specifically how to do this newspaper report? I want to write books. I was like, well, we didn't, did we? We actually taught you loads of different writing skills. We applied them in some examples, and now you've got this whole plethora, this whole bank of vocabulary, sentence structures, different types of writing formality. You can go and apply it to anything you want. It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Really?
Exactly.
I think it links to English more than I realised the more we talk about it. Like, the whole idea again of independent writing. It's like you don't. You said problem solving is not putting it on the screen, showing them how to do it, giving them different numbers. Do you know what independent writing isn't? It isn't giving them the writing on the screen and then saying, right, replace all the adjectives, now it's your writing. It's not, is it? It's actually about building up the fluency over a couple of weeks, perhaps. Building up the skills, giving them everything they need to know, showing them modelling along the way, and then saying, here's an unfamiliar environment because it's a brand new piece of writing. Can you write me about this now? And seeing if they can apply it. And can they apply it straight away? No, not always. But do you know what? They're at school for years. You come back to it. You revisit. So I think we should now talk about how we actually structure the curriculum. I know we're already going on way into this episode, so we might have to cut some stuff here, Dylan. Yeah. But I feel like we should talk about, I really want to talk about like the scheme, like the overview, how you look at maths, because there's two massive parts of maths which I think are like long rivals, and people always argue about them. The types of curriculum, I should say, which is, should we teach maths in a block curriculum or a spiral curriculum? And let me just clarify what those are. So a spiral curriculum is this idea that you kind of, you revisit the whole curriculum 3 times across the year. You sort of go over everything up to Christmas, and you kind of go over it all again after that, and you kind of go over it all again before summer. So they're constantly coming back to it, which is a really good concept, I get. And the block curriculum is this idea of like, no, rather than doing a bit of addition now, then a bit of addition after Christmas, and a bit of addition in June, I'm just going to teach every single addition objective right now in a massive block, and I'm not then going to teach that as my main objective again for the rest of the year. So let's talk about those two things. What are your? I feel like you're the expert today. I'm really enjoying listening to you, even though I've heard all this stuff before. What's your opinion on the spiral curriculum versus the block curriculum? Do you have a favourite, or do you think there's just a whole new perspective we need to take?
So I've been on like a roller coaster journey with my opinion on this, because when I started out, I started out my teaching after the new curriculum came in, and it was like mastery push. Block teaching is the way to go. You should block teach, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that for a long time. Then I came around to it like, well, do you know, it's maybe in 10 years, we'll say spiral's the best way again and come back to it. And my opinion for a long time was, do you know what? It doesn't really matter. As long as you're doing it this, as long as you're going to have stuff, it's cool. I've actually come back around to, I'm happy to sit here and say, I think block teaching is better. I'm happy to sit here and say that. It comes with a caveat.
I was going to say, are there any like...
It does come with a caveat, because I completely agree when people say it's insanely idea. If you think about place value, for example, doing block teaching, in year 4, we do place value for 2 or 3 weeks in September, and then it's not on the curriculum again. Okay.
Yeah, until the next year.
Yeah. Do you really think a good maths teacher will only do place value for 3 weeks in a year at the start, and they just expect a child to understand it?
And never mention it again?
Exactly. No, that's not what happens. So I think in terms of teaching new things and really going down that route of reasoning and fluency, and then the chance to do some problem solving, I think you can only really do that in a block.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. You can really have 2 or 3 weeks to get into it, and then you don't have to worry about shoehorning in problem solving, because you've got to move on to something else next week. You got 2 weeks.
Why don't you think you can do it in a spiral as well?
I think you can do it in a spiral, but I think you'd be rushing. I think I'm thinking about, let's say we're doing addition and subtraction for a week. in before Christmas, and then a week before Easter and a week at the end, right? Let's just say it's 3 weeks or 4 weeks. I think you're really rushing then at the start to cover everything. Okay. You'll be doing it at such a surface level that the children don't get that chance to reason and problem solve and really embed that learning into their long-term memory. I think you kind of just skim over it. Kids kind of get it. They can kind of do it, and then cool. I don't have to go over this again because I'm doing it in 3 months. And it becomes like this false sense of, well, I'm coming back to it, so it's fine.
And then in 3 months, ironically, they've forgotten more than they would have forgotten if you literally did it the week after.
Yeah.
So then you're revisiting things that maybe you wouldn't have had to have done if you were literally teaching that week, the week after, the first time you did it. I agree. For me, it's like this graph that kind of goes up and dips down a little bit because you've left it too long. They were starting to get it. They just needed another week or two to really master. And that's the whole curriculum, isn't it? Mastery.
Yeah. But
I agree.
I think what's important, though, to say is I think you have to build in time to revisit stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to do whole lessons on it, but you have to build in time. For example, this is what we've done. We've been really strict with this in our school. Maths is almost split into 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so maths we have, let me think of the exact timings. We have an hour and 15 minutes for maths.
Yep.
And what we say to people is 20 to 25 minutes every single morning is for your times table, your basic facts, and your revisiting, your recapping, going over stuff, or pre-teaching.
Which we call...
It sounds like a lot.
Our starter time.
Yeah, it's called starter time, but it's mixed starter time, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with your lesson that day. It is literally like a separate lesson.
Yeah.
So in that time, you might think, do you know what? It's been a couple of weeks. We did addition for 3 weeks. They were really good at it, but I want to keep this ticking over. So on Tuesday this week, we're going to do like a 10-minute bit on addition and subtraction.
Yep.
Oh, actually, my children were really fluent with what we did last week. We've moved on to area now, but I can give them a problem to solve. That's where problem solving
See if they can
come in.
apply
They're
it
fluent. Let's see
later.
if they can apply it. Exactly that. Let's do some problem solving. Nothing to do with today's lesson, but I'm going to do some problem solving for something I think they're fluent in that we've just done. Then on Friday, you might think, okay, well, actually, in the future, I know coming up in area, I actually really want to be really strong with their factor pairs and their understanding of times tables. So I'm going to really focus on the 7 times table because my class will weak with that, and it's going to help them in the future.
Yep.
And it helps them with the times tables. It can look scattered. It could look crazy to someone coming in. There's no coherence there in terms of from the outside. But as the teacher with your class, you're doing what they need. So the other year 4 class, if it's all parallel, I would expect to see different starters.
Right.
Maybe 80% could be the same, don't get me wrong, but I would expect to see, oh gosh, you know what, my class, I just want to go over this again. So, and then when it comes to the lesson themselves, that's block teaching, that's getting right into the nitty gritty, sticking your teeth into it, getting them to be really fluent through reasoning and through various fluency, and then problem solving irrelevant, or use your starter time when they've become fluent.
Sure. Can I try and summarize what you said? And you can tell me if I've missed anything. So I think what you're saying here is, it's a bit of a cop-out, really. It's a bit of both, isn't it? When it comes to teaching the main objectives of your lesson, especially with new learning, we should teach in blocks. Allow children to master that objective before we move on with as much time as possible. But we should reserve a time in lessons that is sacred for revisiting. We call it starters. And that very much adopts a spiral approach of there is no set rule. You revisit things as much as you wish, as often as you wish, or as little as you wish. But everything should be revisited across the year to ensure that children are remembering the learning and having a go and having a chance to correct things if they didn't actually quite get it at the time, and even just solidify or even go further with a bit of problem solving. So the spiral curriculum is embedded into our block curriculum. It's a bit of both. There's not one or the other. Interesting approach.
I think in that we can talk about whole times tables, because I think especially lower down in the school when you're learning your times tables, you can use that time to just practice. Don't be scared of rote learning. You wanted to talk about we're thinking about the lesson structure and diving into new learning. The reason block works well is because it allows a slower approach.
Yep.
It allows you to go into what we are widely accepted for new learning in maths. Is the best way to do it is the CPA approach, the concrete, pictorial, abstract. Maybe you could briefly just talk about what you'd expect to see in a good maths lesson. You're introducing a new topic.
Yeah.
What would it look like?
So let's break down some misconceptions as well as we talk. So concrete, pictorial, abstract. You will have heard it if you're a teacher. It was especially over the last decade. It's been a buzzword. It's the idea, and this is what it's really used for. It's not, if your school has an approach of every lesson, I want to see some concrete resources out for your lower ability. I want to see some pictorial stuff for your middles, and I want your tops working in the abstract. That is not what concrete, pictorial, abstract process is. This is what it really is. When any child, any ability, learns something brand new, they've never looked at this objective before in a previous year, you should start in the concrete.
What do we mean by the concrete?
So the concrete, the physical world, something you can touch, something you can manipulate. That's what we call them, manipulatives quite often, I can't speak. But things like Dean's blocks, counters, those kinds of things, they're all manipulatives that you can hold and
I try and
use,
manipulate you. Are you manipulative?
I'm manipulatable.
That's malleable.
It's a hard word. No. I'll make it harder.
But yeah,
say.
sorry. So
you start.
Is anything
a
manipulative? I'm interested here. Like, what do you mean by manipulative?
Honestly, literally anything that helps them understand the concept. Genuinely, anything. It doesn't have to be something you've bought on the teacher website that's like, oh, these blocks are perfect. It could be anything. You could bring in something from home. It could be cups if they're useful for what you're doing. Whatever. And then because you're teaching them the concepts at that point, the idea is you're allowing them to build conceptual understanding in the easiest way, which is the real world. You know, you don't go up to a person that's learning like a 2-year-old. You don't go up to them and the first time they've ever had any encounter with a tree, you don't show them the word tree, do you? You go up to a tree in real life and you let them touch it and you say, tree, this is a tree, right? And then eventually, do you know what? Once they really start to get the idea, you can show them a picture of a tree and they'll start to be like, oh, that's that thing that I've seen in real life, because obviously the real life makes most sense to me. And then eventually you can say, here's these random squiggles that we've made up that represent this idea of tree. Maths is the same. So you're getting them to the squiggles, the numbers at the end.
Yeah. So right? when with Rory, I want to teach him what a lion is, I should take him up to a lion.
Let him stroke a lion.
Because that's concrete.
Let him touch the lion, right? Let him feel the inside of the lion's mouth. Lion, sharp.
But only then can I show him a picture.
Yeah, okay. All right. Maybe he doesn't have to touch the lion. You know what? You're joking, but there is actually a really good point here, which is you can quite often start in the pictorial. Genuinely, there is a middle ground where some things.
It's a journey, and you can.
It's a journey, and it's quite often you could, if it's something is so obvious, like really,
the lion's gonna eat you.
Like
this manipulative will bite your head off.
You know, like classic reception, right? Where they will use like apples, won't they? Apples. Do you know what? They don't need real apples. No. They might have counters to represent the apples, so they can physically move something. They can understand the idea of the number, but you know what? The apple is just something to hook them in.
Even in the concrete, though, right? Even in the concrete, there is also progression.
Yeah.
So if you think about Dean's blocks, like physically, there's one small block. Yeah. Physically, there's a 10, which is literally 10 times bigger. Then there's 100, which is literally 10 times bigger. And you can get 10 tens and see it's 100.
Yeah.
So that's something you could do with, honestly, year 3 children, even year 2 children. But the ones you might do with your receptions and you're just counting and stuff.
Yeah.
But then there's still progression there, because still with the concrete is you think about place value counters where they have a 1 written on them and a 10 written on them. And I've said this for a long time. I think counters are closer to pictorial than they are to concrete.
Yeah.
And there'll be people though who'll say, concrete, pictorial, abstract, let's get the counters out first. I'm like, oh, okay, actually, why are you getting the concrete out? Is it because it's new learning? Do they understand the relationship between 1 and 10?
My answer to this is every time, and I think this is valid, is that both of them are they're new learning in different ways.
Exactly.
When you're getting out the Dean's blocks, the new learning is honestly them literally understanding the relationships between sizes of numbers, knowing that 10 is 10 times bigger than 1, and that's what 10 times bigger looks like. When you're at the counter stage, it's them understanding that in place value we exchange. That is it.
So with most year 5 and 6 children, for example, you wouldn't necessarily feel like you need to get the Deans out.
No, most of the time. Yeah. Most of the time. If
I had
a child working at year 1 level in year 6, I'd absolutely be getting them out.
Yeah, of course.
But most of the time, not at all. So a new concept in year 6 might be multiplying fractions together.
Sure.
And I think it is valid to start in the pictorial with this and show them an array, right? You know, with multiplication, like with area, we'd show them 7 times 4. We'd show them 7 rows of 4, right? Yeah. I would get a rectangle out and I'd say, okay, we know how multiplication works. We know it labels these two sides and we know it's linked to area. Okay, we've got 3/4 times 1/2. Yeah. How are we going to do that? How are we going to label it? Okay, cool. Let's cut it. Let's cut this one into 1/2. So we've got 2 rows. Yeah. Let's cut this one into columns, and let's cut this one into 4 rows because we're showing quarters. Yeah. And then we can use shading to show 3/4 of 1/2. Like, let's just take 1/2 and let's just do 3/4 of. Like, you can do
because there were people who think year 6, cool, you're in the abstract now, because this journey CPA is just it's just free.
No, not at all.
Right.
Even with a top set maths in year 6, I will still use. The pictorial with new learning, and you know what? I might do it for 5 minutes. Do you know what? Because that level of that ability child very quickly goes, oh, it always happens that you multiply the numerators and the denominators because that's how you end up shading that bit in. Can we just do that? And I'm like, that's why it works. You've got the concept now. Crack on. You've got it.
So going back to what we said earlier about solving maths anxiety and anxiousness, and this whole generation of just like, why are you doing this? Well, it's new maths. It's nonsense. By the way, I'm still scared of doing maths myself. Listen, it's not their fault. Okay, I'm acting quite glib about it, but there is like meaning behind this. So when you're as a teacher thinking, why am I bothering? No, honestly, there is meaning behind this, because when the children make those connections, when they see it in front of them, when you're facilitating that for them, they will understand things more. They will be less anxious when they're older. They won't be as flippant about it because it's not something they're worried about.
Yeah, but Dylan, they're not going to get those Dean blocks in that test, though, are they?
No, okay, all right, okay. I see what you're doing here. Let's round this off talking about assessment. We could be here all day talking about maths. I'm hoping, just a quick breather here, that you're getting the impression of how passionate we are about maths and things like that. We absolutely love it, and there's a reason why we're maths specialists and need maths. So I hope you found this useful. Let's finish off with assessment because I think there's going to be a dose of realism here as well. Assessment is weird. Okay, it's weird. It's weird. It is the end of my discussion. Assessment is so odd. Let's break it down into the two types of assessment we're talking about. Formative assessment is what goes on every single minute of the day as a teacher. So you're constantly looking for feedback from the children to see how they're getting on. The most, in my opinion, crucial form of assessment that I think defines you as a good teacher or not. Genuine. I'd say it's that important. This is why assessment's weird. I think that is the most important thing. Genuinely, how you react to your
what
children.
You're picking up when you're teaching.
What you're picking up, how you adapt to them. We talked about teacher standards and adaptation. I think that is where you earn your salt as a teacher, where you can't just go off the slides and stuff. Anyone can get a scheme up. It's when you're adapting stuff. Okay. And that comes in with being a good maths teacher in general, by the way.
Yeah.
You adapt things for your class. Pitch and pace has to be different. Your pitch might be higher because you formatively have assessed the children are better. The pitch you have to slow down in the lesson because you think, oh, these kids don't get this. The pace, okay, we're going to be quicker. We're going to do this small step in half a lesson. Oh gosh, they didn't get this. Let's do it again tomorrow. So this all comes under formative assessment. And that's what good maths teaching looks like. You adapt the scheme that you've got in front of you. You don't just take it as gospel. The progression, brilliant, use it. But your pitch and your pace is what you're changing. That's formative assessment to me. Okay. We'll go into more detail about that maybe in a second. The other one is summative. Okay. And summative assessment is them sitting down for a formal test. Honestly, I'm someone who said I think the SATs should be kept, and I like the idea of the SATs because it gives a benchmark. I still agree with that opinion. I still haven't changed my mind on that. I think about a child's journey through school, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I think about them doing 3 tests a year at every single year group just for the data for the school. I think most of the time it's a waste of time.
Yeah, big time. If you actually add up that amount of time, right? If you really think about it, I always get so annoyed when we do an assessment week, genuinely, because I'm like, oh, that's 3 more lessons of teaching maths that I'm not going to give those kids.
So context for you, you're a year 6 teacher, for example. It's hotting up to the SATs. The SATs are looming over schools. You've got to get good scores. It's seen as very normal to do 3 or 4 past SATs papers in test conditions, very much like the real thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
You think?
Yeah. I think one's good because I think familiarity is a different subject, is a different thing. I think it's good to make the kids familiar so they're, again, not as anxious about how the tests are going to be, what they're going to feel like and look like. But it's a waste of time to me because you know what? I never really learn anything from them. People say, oh, you can do a gap analysis. Well, listen, half the gap analysis on a summative assessment, unless it's literally the end of the year, is stuff you haven't even taught them anyway. It's like, oh, they can't do that. Yeah, I know they can't do that. I haven't taught them yet. Didn't need to know that. And now they just feel rubbish because they've just got tons of questions wrong.
How many times? Let's talk about that for a second because when you do that first test of the year, every teacher will know this, okay? Again, I'm using year 4 because I'm in year 4. We do a year 4 test after like 5 weeks, right? And it's just an end of year. It's just a curriculum test. It's a year 4 curriculum test. So there's fractions on there. We're not touching fractions until Easter. That's the nature of the block curriculum. Okay, these tests I feel like were made for the spiral curriculum.
Potentially.
Okay, let's have term 1. Let's cover everything. Let's see where they are. Wow, that gap analysis is actually quite useful because all of my kids, I've got 95% plus in addition and subtraction. So when I revisit that, I'll maybe do 1 lesson instead of a whole week. And that means I can do more on the fractions, which they got 20% on, but I've still done fractions. So this is kind of useful information. I don't feel like assessment's caught up with the block way of teaching.
No. Okay. Well, counter argument to this straight away from a leader, head of school sort of perspective, is it allows them to track progress though. Because if you give them 3 end of year tests, one at the start of the year, one in the middle, one at the end, you can very easily, if the tests are all the same standard, you can track progress, right?
You can. Okay. All I would say to that is, why are you doing that? Like, honestly, what's the purpose? It's not for the kids, is it?
No.
Let's not ever pretend it's for the kids because it's not.
Is it for the teachers?
Do you know what my gap is though? Quickly for the kids, my gap is what I haven't taught yet. So I'm not changing. I'm going to teach that in March. I'm teaching that, so I'm not going to change that now.
But can you argue some of the gaps will be things you have taught though, right?
Potentially, but do you know what? That's where formative assessment comes in.
Yeah.
Do you know? Honestly, right? If it says my kids can't do column method subtraction properly because they've got gaps in their test. If I didn't know that from teaching it to them for 3 weeks, then that's a problem. If they can do it and they didn't do it on the test, that's kind of good to know, but I know they can do it. So all we're actually seeing is how the kids perform on a test.
Yeah.
That's all we're actually testing here. So let's get real then and stop pretending it's something different, because it's for the school to track data to be able to say, oh, my teachers are teaching well because they're just delivering the curriculum and they're getting higher scores. You could deliver the curriculum completely averagely and your scores would go up just based on coverage. It's not an indication of how good you're doing. There's a lot more nuance to it, basically. And I just think I'd rather teach the kids 3 more lessons of maths. Yeah. So again, we're talking here about what a good maths lesson looks like. It looks like constant quality formative assessment. Do formative assessment all the time. Feedback from your children. Change your lesson on the spot if you have to. If your children can't do something they need to do to access the rest of the lesson.
Can I just add as well, formative assessment can include testing. It can include testing. We do something in our school, it's cumulative testing. It's not, so just take away this idea of the summative idea of like, oh, let's test them on the whole of the year group, even though they haven't taught the whole curriculum yet. You can do formative, I do formative testing every single week. I'll spend 10 minutes doing an arithmetic test purely based on skills I've taught them. The arithmetic skills I've taught them, just to see if they're retaining the knowledge. But to me,
that is still summative, but just done right. Like it's summative in that I'm not forming this opinion as I go. I've taught this and I'm seeing if they can do it. Yeah. It's like good summative assessment. It's closer to formative. You're right, because you're kind of teaching as you go. It's so easy
to manage. You know what I do every single week? Just again, if you're listening
this
for actual ideas,
policy,
for ideas, what I do is I sit there on some point in the week and I'll write 10 arithmetic questions based on stuff we've either been learning recently or based on stuff from weeks ago where I'm like, oh, they were showing at that time that they needed more practice on this, and I will then deliver the test. I will literally just do not even like a formal gap analysis. I will just jot on a piece of paper which questions were most incorrectly answered, right? And I'll just see if there's a bit of a pattern here. And I'll be like, oh, wow, number 6 points out. We'll be doing, I don't know, decimals multiplied by whole numbers. Okay, brilliant. Okay, I clearly didn't teach that very well. Next week, I will put that in my starter. And then guess what? I'll put it in that week's test as well, and I'll just see if it improved. And if it did, cool. If I can tick it off, then I'll move on. And every week, I'm just using a formative assessment tool of arithmetic test to very, very easily, quickly identify gaps in things I've taught, being really important there, things I've taught, and then fill them if I need to. Easy.
So this is how I would summarize this whole point here with assessment, okay? Assessment is genuinely, honestly, only useful if you're testing children on things they've done. Okay, look at it like that. Yeah. If you're testing children on things they have not been taught yet, you are completely wasting everyone's time. That is honestly true. Because in that time that I did that test, when they were doing questions they'd never seen before, oh my God.
But they might already be able to do it.
They might already be able to do it. Cool. Do you know what? In my lesson planning, in that case, they'll move through the fluency and reasoning. They'll be able. Does a test really test if they can explain their answer, justify their reasoning, prove something, do a problem solve?
That's a good point.
No. So if they can already do it in a test situation, cool. I've got 17 other things that I care about though from the curriculum.
With that objective.
So do you know what? We're going to get there. I've got a problem solving thing for them where they've got to try and, trial an improvement or draw a picture or act something out. It doesn't matter if they can do it in a test or not. That's not changed what's going to happen when it comes to the lesson.
You can still enrich their mathematical understanding. Completely. Going right back to the beginning of this episode, you can still enrich, the curriculum aims. Yeah. You can still
let's look at those aims, shall we? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. I've not done that. Oh, but they answered question 44 in this test that we haven't taught yet. Cool. Has that changed the aims of the curriculum?
Yeah.
No.
And I'm guessed.
Maybe.
That's interesting. So, I think our opinions on the assessment are quite clear. Formative, very useful, essential to being a good maths teacher. Summative, has some places, has some uses, but really low down on the list. Generally a bit of a waste of their time and your time. You could have just taught them 3 good maths lessons in that time that you did the tests, to be honest. So
brilliant. Yeah. Well, I think this episode could have been twice as long.
I know. I could feel us trying to be like, let's move on.
I know, let's move on. But guys, I hope you found it useful. You clicked on it for a bit of help with to do with maths. Hopefully you can see how passionate we are. And we do to an extent, I think, kind of know what we're talking about, I hope. Otherwise, we just wasted it.
Let us know if you've got any questions as well. We'll always answer.
Have to tell maths.
By we, I mean Dylan. So.
Yep. Oh, okay, cheers. Thanks for opening that up. Guys, thank you so much for listening. And if you've got this far, please, all we ask really is that you leave us a review, follow us on Instagram at TCB Podcast, and give us a message. We love talking to you guys.
Sweet. See you next time.
Ooh.